Sarah J., thank you so very much for your inspirational remarks, and we really appreciate that. Thank you. Our second speaker this evening is Sam Wolfe. Following Sam, we will have a special musical number from Jerem Redhair playing Be Still My Soul. He will be accompanied by Reese Davison. Sam Wolfe is a civil rights attorney and advocate with the Southern Poverty Law Center who has led high-profile litigation of national significance. Sam founded and continues to lead the SPLC's LGBT Rights Project. His work, often set in the Deep South, focuses on achieving greater respect and equality for LGBT people. His cases include the first ever consumer fraud lawsuit challenging conversion therapy that purports to change sexual orientation from gay to straight. He represents transgender clients in employment and prison discrimination cases and initiated the first marriage equality case in Alabama. He also helped defeat a policy that prevented teachers from stopping anti-LGBT bullying, something never before accomplished by litigation. The suit also achieved a landmark consent decree that established a blueprint for remedying anti-LGBT school environments nationwide. Sam and his team have restored freedom of speech and expression to LGBT students in multiple southeastern school districts, often negotiating resolutions without the need for litigation. Previously, Sam was a litigation associate at a leading international law firm in New York City. He is a graduate of Georgetown University Law Center. The National LGBT Bar Association has recognized Sam as one of the best LGBT lawyers under 40. Other experiences include in the Air Force, he was in special operations and was also an English teacher in Taiwan. Sam completed a 2-year Mormon mission in northern France, Luxembourg, and Belgium. He currently serves as a member of Affirmation Board of Directors. Please welcome Sam Wolfe.
I wish I could see someone. It's really an honor to be here in Provo, Utah, not far from where I was a student at BYU a number of years ago. And I remember what it felt like recently finishing the 2-year mission that was just mentioned and starting out at BYU, where I felt like, this would be a safe place for me to find a wife, to live the Mormon dream, and everything was going to be okay. And like many of you, I'd really found a lot of coping mechanisms to deal with the fact that I'm gay. I memorized hundreds of scriptures. Whenever there was a cute BYU student walking down the pathway, then I'd immediately go to some scripture or some hymn or something like that. And I felt like I sort of had this more or less going on. But I came to a moment of crisis, and what had happened was before I was at BYU, I had been in the Air Force, and one of my best friends in the Air Force, his name was Kurt, and I really loved Kurt. We went to church together. He was a beautiful person, and he was on the East Coast in the Air Force, and after my mission, he called me up, and he told me that he's gay, and he also mentioned that he has feelings for me. And I felt, well, this is okay. I'm in the West Coast, he's on the East Coast, but a common friend of ours was getting married not far from here, and her mom knew that Kurt and I were friends, and so she arranged a hotel room for me and Kurt. And and I thought that, okay, I've had this figured out. I have all of these spiritual muscles so strong, and I've been such a good church member, but this is really more than I can deal with. This is more than any church hymn is going to be able to counteract. And so And so I was really worried about this. And about that time, I saw in the BYU newspaper an ad. And the ad said something like, if you suffer from same-sex attractions, call this number and we'll help. And I've done everything else for years and years and years, so I went ahead and called the number. I needed help. And so that landed me into an evergreen group, also not far from here, at the Provo Hospital Annex. And so it was a group of evergreen individuals. And I only went once or twice to that group, but it was really the first time ever that I'd conceived of perhaps not getting married to a woman, because a number of those men, I'm not saying it's the case in every situation, but for those particular men that were in that meeting, they'd had really very bad experiences with having gotten married to a woman, have kids, and it turned into train wrecks for some of them. And I thought, this isn't what I want. I don't want to be in their shoes a number of years in the future. And so maybe I need to kind of think about this some more. But I learned about a BYU group from there, and they said it was a meat market, don't go. But I went. and it was amazing, because for the first time in my life, I had a whole bunch of gay friends. And there was a bit of a front that it was conversion therapy, but the man that was leading it, I don't want to out him, but he was very wise. He'd been there for decades, and I think that he got it. It was a bit of a front that it was conversion therapy, but really he gave me my permission to go on a date with a man for the first time, another BYU student. We went to La Boheme at BYU. It was a wonderful date. We didn't even hold hands, but it was amazing because for the first time, I experienced sort of magnetism in a date. And it was so exciting to just have that sort of all those different levels of interest, and to really feel like what it's like to go on a date with someone where there's actually electricity. And I'd been dating a woman at the same time, and it just didn't compare at all. So, but I wasn't equipped for this, because as a Mormon, we're taught, follow the Spirit, you'll know when you're sinning. And so I really trusted that in my life. But what really surprised me about this situation was going on a date felt so incredibly right on so many different levels. And so that really led me to explore more and more being gay at BYU. And before I knew it, I had all sorts of gay friends at BYU, and it was really a great place to go to school, and I'm glad that I went. So fast forward, since I don't have a lot of time, I would like to talk a little bit about one of my big cases that resolved really recently. And it also has to do with conversion therapy, and that's an important topic for this group. Some of you are familiar with John DeLynne's research, and he maybe has the most recent and biggest sample of LGBTQ Mormons. And 80% of respondents to his survey, which wasn't terribly long ago, had gone through some sort of sexual orientation change efforts. 80%. That's a huge number. And so as was in my introduction, I'm a civil rights lawyer. And so about 3 years ago, I was sitting in a room and we were thinking about this problem of conversion therapy, because it's really bunk science. There's so many problems with this, and we know from anecdotal evidence that it can cause great harm. We've even heard some Randall the other night talking about his one experience of what that did to him, and the real depression and angst that can cause, even death. And so we were looking at, what are we going to do? And so it was really exciting as a civil rights lawyer to see this problem and start to come up with a legal strategy and go have some outreach opportunities to go and try to find plaintiffs. And how it developed was that I ended up representing 4 young men. 3 were from Orthodox Jewish families, and 1 was a Mormon, Michael Ferguson, who some of you know. And yeah, we love Michael. And then also 2 mothers, Orthodox Jewish moms, and they were part of the case because they had paid for conversion therapy for their sons, and we needed that as part of the claim. And so anyway, the case concluded just the end of June, so just a few months ago, and a jury agreed with us. It was a jury of regular people in New Jersey, and they agreed with us that the defendants, the conversion therapists, had committed consumer fraud. And this is the first time this has ever happened in a lawsuit. It was really amazing to see this play out over a long time. Litigation can take a long time. There was discovery. There was the trial that lasted about a month. We had expert witnesses, a recent president of the American Psychiatric Association. Some of you know Lee Beckstead, who is from Salt Lake City, and he's one of the foremost experts in sexual orientation change efforts. And it was incredible to really subject conversion therapy to the light of a judicial process, of cross-examination, of discovery, of really having them have to answer for these claims that they had made about conversion therapy that were false. And I don't have a lot of time, so I really want to just focus on 3 maybe takeaways that hopefully is also of interest of you for the case. And one of them is that really the fundamental thing, the fundamental mistake of conversion therapy and what they ended up getting burned for in the end is this premise that this falsehood that being gay is a disorder, that it's some sort of a developmental disorder. And this is really the basis of conversion therapy, that somehow it's mom's fault, mom was too close, or it's dad's fault for having to work all the time or be in a church calling, or someone was sexually abused, which unfortunately happens, but doesn't actually cause homosexuality, or something went wrong. And so that's the model. And the premise, as I said, is that being gay is some sort of a disorder or something like that. And that's not true. The mental health professions have known for more than 40 years that homosexuality is a natural variation of human sexuality, that homosexuality is a natural variation. And so really these sorts of quote unquote therapies that are based on this falsehood that it's a disorder of some kind, that's where they go wrong. And I think that premise is it's so insidious. And you could imagine how that one falsehood has caused so much angst and pain and maybe even deaths in our communities, that there's something deficient, there's something disordered about being gay. And I can really imagine our communities, our church communities, what would that look like if they got it? We heard just earlier, we're waiting for some revelation or something like that. And I think that revelation comes in a lot of different ways. And we've really known for more than 40 years, all the mental health professions known that that homosexuality is a natural variation of human sexuality. And so it's not, the revelation is there, and we just need to kind of live up to it. Thank you. The second thing that I thought was really interesting about the trial is the other side's main tactic, or their main strategy, was to recruit far and wide so-called success stories. And as far as I know, there might be a few of those in the audience today, I'm not quite sure. But it turned out that they came up with 17 individuals that stepped forward as success stories for the proposition that conversion therapy had worked for them somehow. And so we flew around the country and even to Canada to depose these people, meaning to question them under oath, and there's video cameras and all of that. And I often found myself feeling a lot of empathy and compassion for these individuals that had stepped forward that didn't even seem like that they had really quite understood what the case was about. And so there were those 17 success story witnesses that came out during the discovery phase of the case, and then that boiled down to a smaller number at trial that actually testified at trial as success story witnesses. And it was really remarkable because the defendants, the conversion therapists in our case, they had told our clients that they had helped convert hundreds, even thousands of people from gay to straight. That was part of their misrepresentations. And so when it was put to the test, Jonah, the main defendant in the case, Jews offering new alternatives to homosexuality, they didn't come up with a single, not one person who had started as homosexual and that through Jonah's program had become heterosexual as they promised. And so it was so interesting to be able to question these individuals under oath, and to, we had to ask some invasive questions about, what the change that they were professing actually meant. And what it meant for a lot of them is, maybe they entered a mixed orientation marriage, and that actually wasn't what the case was about at all. Or maybe for some of them, they felt like that some of the support they had received from Jonah, and also another organization, People Can Change, that had helped them to maintain celibacy or be close to their religious affiliation. And that also wasn't what the case was about at all. The case was really about the misrepresentation that these programs could help change sexual orientation. And so it was really, I think, very telling that this is the biggest lawsuit about conversion therapy, and they really came up short in terms of success story witnesses. And again, that's not to malign any of the courageous individuals that stepped forward, in some sense courageous, and in some sense poorly advised, that came forward to be deposed and sort of give their voice in this. And so the third thing that I really want to focus on, what was the third thing? I think this is the third thing, and it's probably pretty important. Okay. So the third thing is that it's amazing how crazy these therapies actually get. And a lot of this came out in the course of the trial because for those of you who have gone through some of these programs, including People Can Change, and the reason why I mention them is they weren't a defendant, but our clients, as part of Jonah, were sent to these Weekend in the Woods programs, and so that program became a focus of trial because it was part of Jonah's. So it's a little bit complicated, but it became a part of it. And so, so these Weekends in the Woods, for example, they'll include sometimes people going through what's called guts work. And a guts kit will include such things as handcuffs, duct tape, rope, gravestones, even buckets for vomiting. And you can imagine the sorts of things that would take place. Just one of them was our client, Haim. He was a victim of childhood sex abuse as a kid. And so he was instructed to reenact, with different participants, actually make the scene of his childhood sex abuse and relive that in a way that presumably, or they said, would help him to overcome it. But this is like completely beyond the pale in terms of accepted psychological or therapeutic modalities. And so these sorts of things are going on. And also the Weekends in the Woods, they really like to get naked a lot. And I don't necessarily hold that against them because I also like to get naked sometimes. But the problem is that they're, at least the people that are promoting these programs, they're holding them out as being able to help change sexual orientation. And I think it's a little bit crazy to say, it doesn't even make sense to say that, look, you're gonna come hang out with a bunch of men in the woods and we're gonna spend a lot of time holding each other and cuddling time, and we're gonna get naked and skinny dip, and we're gonna have cake fights naked, and we're gonna have mud fights naked, and then we're gonna all get in the shower together and wash each other off, and this is gonna help you to become heterosexual. I'm serious. I'm absolutely serious. That's what they say. So it's a farce. And it's not supportable, and it's consumer fraud. But is this to say, and this is one of my last points, I'm probably close to my time, but is this to say that those individuals who participated in this are errant, or we should necessarily pass judgment on them? And that's not for me to do. I really see it as more kind of systemic. And so we go back to the first premise of talking about homosexuality as a natural variation of human sexuality. The way that I look at it is there's really systems at work here. And so individuals who are going to these Weekends in the Woods, they're caught up in somehow having to manage whether it be celibacy, which, I've been through periods of that, but it's not something that I think I could do over the long term, or even mixed orientation marriages, which I know some of you are in. But that's really, for those that are kind of completely over on the homosexual spectrum, I see some of these programs as kind of like a spin-off of that. And so, it's really a systemic problem. Like, how do you manage one's homosexuality within these systems that are oppressive and unaccepting, and also, I think, built from this premise that needs to be completely rejected, that being gay is somehow disordered or deficient or something like that. So really, my vision for all of this is that I'm a civil rights lawyer. I have to focus on, kind of cases I can bring. But, hopefully, these sorts of cases, this raising awareness about the nature of homosexuality within our community, beyond this room, can help people just recognize that we are people like others, that we deserve the same dignity and respect as others, that our light within is equal to others, and we have gifts to share. And, it's time. And your light, our collective light, is a force to be reckoned with. And it's really exciting to be in this journey with you and get to be a civil rights lawyer and hopefully help take the next few steps forward. So thanks again for inviting me to speak tonight, and it's a pleasure to be with you.